So we'd like to bring in Kansas Republican Congressman Tim Huelskamp, who sits on the House Budget Committee. So I would like to start with your thoughts on the White House's offer, if I dare here.
Well, I didn't laugh out loud, but pretty close. I mean, we've had 4 straight years of trillion-dollar deficits, and this president can't find anywhere to actually reduce spending. We've got a spending problem, not a revenue problem in Washington. But I agree with the president from 2 years ago when he said you can't raise taxes in the middle of the recession. I think the economy is slower than it was last year, slower than it was the year before, and we have this idea and notion that somehow raising taxes is going to create jobs. We have about 23 million Americans looking for work. Raising taxes doesn't create jobs. If we want more revenue in Washington, we need to grow the economy. We need to provide perhaps a moratorium for Obamacare. We need to talk about ways we can grow the economy and get Washington out of the way so people can go back to work.
Well, Congressman, you know, Americans really want to compromise here, and they want finally a plan and to resolve this fiscal cliff. Will Republicans now counter with their own version of a plan? And if you could share some details of what that potentially would look like.
Well, I think one of the problems with Washington in general is these things are taking place behind closed doors. That didn't work out a year and a half ago when they put together a bad deal, both sides, the president, the majority leader, and the speaker, that created this crisis. But the point was they wanted to borrow another $2.3 trillion. They promised they'd cut spending, and here we are at the end of the year. We haven't cut any spending yet since August. And now they want to borrow more money and they want to raise taxes. But again, 2 years ago, President Obama signed and extended what I call the Bush-Obama tax cuts. I think we need to do that, provide for some certainty to the economy, and talk about looking at some real spending cuts as well.
Some are criticizing this and calling it a very aggressive plan that the president has put forth. And in public comments like the ones we heard from Boehner, Reid, both sides taking really hard stances. But some insiders saying that a deal is within reach, and much of it is for show now. New Jersey Democratic Congressman Rob Andrews told Politico this: there's the public choreography, then there is the real choreography, maybe something that you alluded to. To reach a deal, it has to look like there was a lot of fighting before the deal was reached. What's your response to that? Do you think that there is a lot of grandstanding going on here, and we're actually going to make the deadline that the president suggested, which is before Christmas?
Well, there's always a lot of grandstanding in Washington on both sides. This is my first term in Congress. I think most Americans are disappointed with the games. But the president prepared a budget and sent it to Congress in the last 2 years, and not a single member of the House or the Senate ever voted for his budget because it wasn't serious. And here we are 30-some days before the end of the year, the biggest tax increase in American history. And I think the president seriously wants to raise taxes on everybody, or else he'd present a serious plan that actually involves reductions in spending, which has never happened in Washington for a long, long time.
The GOP is taking a lot of criticism here. There's a CNN ORC poll released this week that it shows public opinion that is decidedly against Republicans in Congress. 45% said they would be more responsible for negotiations failing, while only 34% said that they would blame President Obama. Do you feel like there's more pressure on Republicans to give up some ground here in order to reach some sort of a consensus?
Well, I know a lot of folks in Washington are worried about what the polls say, but I'm worried about what happens to our state of a nation. We've got a $16.3 trillion debt, and the president has provided no leadership to actually, how do you actually reduce spending? What's the balanced approach if you can't identify a single cut? Meanwhile, the president wants to spend $4 million for a vacation at the end of the year in the midst of what is a huge crisis in our nation's history.
And so, Congressman, my last question to you is, do you think that we will actually go off the fiscal cliff? Do you think there'll be a compromise that'll be reached before Christmas?
That is a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but it's not about Washington. It's not about what the politicians are thinking. It's about how do we create more jobs in America and get our economy growing again. And I'm afraid if the $400 billion in tax increases go into effect on January 1st, I'm guarantee you we're going to have hundreds of thousands of Americans lose their job, and that's unacceptable.
Congressman Tim Huelskamp of Kansas, member of the House Budget Committee, thanks for spending some time with us this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.